3 months to write, and it took 2 months to orchestrate, and it took probably another month and a half to do the final preparation of the score, and probably another month and a half to do the parts. So, because the score is, you know, probably 400 pages of music. It's a pretty big book. So, yes.
When was the film made originally?
The film was made in 1929, and it was right at the very end of the silent film era. In fact, there's a new version of the film that's on DVD, and there's a little trailer that they show that they made for the movie, and it has sound to it. So they made the film, and then when they made the trailer later or something, I don't know. Barry might know more about that than I, but the sound came in. So you actually get to hear Douglas Fairbanks speak. It's a little disappointing, actually. You think he's going to have this, you know, unbelievable voice, and it's like, oh, yeah, okay, he's a regular guy, you know. So, but it was right at the very end of that, because this was 29, and then 1930, Frankenstein and Dracula, Public Enemy. Those are three major films that came out in 1930, all talkies. So this was right at the very end of that. It's right on that cusp. It's an interesting time.
And most of those movies that were made at that time, when sound was being introduced, had very little musical score. That's why we suggested Frankenstein as a possibility,
right.
And Dracula, although Dracula was done by
Philip Glass.
Yes.
Yeah, Philip Glass did a score to that. Yeah. So.
How many times did you see this movie as you were?
God.
Yeah, how do you manage to sit through it every time now?
It's actually refreshing to see it now because I haven't seen it for a while. I, deliberately stayed away, but yeah, you'd see it because generally what I do is I'd set up kind of a working method for myself. Where I figured out how many minutes the whole score was, and I figured out how much time I had. And so I set a time limit for myself every day. Say I need to write a minute and a half or something like that of the music. So first thing I would do every day generally would be just watch that minute and a half or so that I was going to score for that day. Just look at it. Yeah, just watch it. And then probably watch it again. Probably go get another cup of coffee. It's the usual, it's just a routine really. And it falls into that. It falls into a regular working, you get up in the morning and say goodbye to your wife, and then you get to work. And then usually after I watched it a couple times, some things would start to come to me, and I'd write them down. And I figured early in the game that it wasn't going to work for me to write this all down by hand. And luckily, I have a setup at home that allows me to input the music directly into a music software program so that I can start, getting the notes down right away without actually having to physically write them down. So I could play them. Basically what I'm doing is playing them into the computer, and the computer's putting a score up for me to see. So I did that, and I would, so that's what I would do, like day after day. And I would just, until, a minute and a half became 3 minutes, became 9 minutes, became 18, became so forth and so on. So. And as you might have heard in this film, as you go along, there's themes, and there's recognizable themes that you hear again and again. And my whole idea in this film was to kind of like what I did with Safety Last, except I really took it a lot further in this film. Was the idea of themes that develop. So that as the drama unfolds and as the drama develops, the themes associated with the characters develop also. So you hear a theme, but you rarely are you ever going to hear the same theme exactly the same way. D'Artagnan's theme is pretty, that's my movie theme. That's my big theme for this movie. So that doesn't change as much, but even that undergoes a lot of dramatic change. And then when characters are interacting, their themes interact too, and you might have noticed that. And there's a couple places I'm particularly proud of because there's 3 or 4 themes simultaneously combined together to make a musical texture. So, and that was challenging, but, you know, a blast when I finally figured out how to do it. You know, it was one of those great moments, so.
I love how you wove in the Les
Yeah.
Marseille, French theme.
Yeah, for the glory of France.
Yes.
For the glory of
I hear
France,
those
yeah.
little familiar strains.
And it's there at the end with D'Artagnan, but it's kind of buried because the whole band's playing, so it's kind of hard to hear the trombones blasting there. So, yeah, that's the one quote in the whole movie. There's no other quotes of any other tunes. It's all my stuff except for I figured that's in the public domain.
Yes.
Yeah. So, you can get away with that one.
Mike, can
Tony.
you name some of the various instruments that are in this?
Yeah, there's a lot of them. There's about 45 instruments in a typical band like this. There's a whole range of, first of all, there's flutes and piccolos, then there's oboes and English horns. There's a whole group of clarinets. There's regular clarinets, but then there's also bass clarinet. And then there's bassoon and contrabassoon. So those are the main woodwind instruments that you'd find in an orchestra. Then there's also a whole set of saxophones, soprano, alto, tenor, baritone saxophones. And let's see what else. That's the woodwinds. And then in the brass, you would have trumpets, and you have trombones. You'd have typically, in a band like this, you'd have 3 or 4 of each of those. And then French horns, there were 4 in this. Then there's the euphonium, which some people are not familiar with. It looks like a tuba that somebody put in the washing machine. If you could actually get it in. It's it looks like a small tuba, and there's tubas as well. And then I also used piano, which is a little bit unusual. There's usually 1 string bass, and then there's also percussion. And I had 5 percussionists for this. So when you put all those together, you've got quite a bunch. And as you can hear, they can make a racket when they need to. But at the same time, you have this unbelievable palette to choose from. You know, you've got your reds and you've got your blues and you've got your greens and you've got everything. You get everything you need. So if you want to do something very delicate, you can do that. But if you want something big, like at the end, you can do a great big thing like that. Like when Constance dies, there's 1 note in the flute. You know, that's it. You know, you got all these instruments, but when she dies, when her hand falls down, there's just 1 note in the flute. And you've got all of that. You can have 1 note, you can have 1,000. You know, it sounds like 1,000. But it's a great ensemble because of all the great, you know, the range that you can have and all the different colors you can put together. So it's a dream come true to write for a group like that. So it's great. Yeah.
Mike, I mean, I've watched orchestras and bands play, and they're used to working key signatures and following a conductor. But
Right.
what were the added difficulties to get those 45 players to play in time with the movie score?
Interestingly enough, the players didn't see a thing. And this is the typical way if you they don't do it so much. Well, they still do it this way sometimes in Hollywood. But when they're making a film like this, there'll be a screen here, and the orchestra will be here, and the conductor's there. So the conductor is watching the film and conducting, and the players are watching the conductor. They don't see anything, and that's good. That's really good, because it's good that one person is watching and seeing what's going on and conducting it and coordinating all of that, and the players are then coordinating to him. Because if they were trying to second guess how it should be coordinated, forget it. So that's the typical way in Hollywood. I've seen the rooms where they do that. They're these gigantic rooms that'll fit an orchestra, and then a big screen, and then there's a podium, and there's 1 guy conducting. And then they'll do as many takes as they need to. And of course, for an orchestra, for any film like that, they do it in small takes, generally in small takes, in as small groups as they need to. And then they splice them together and start putting them together. And they can do relatively small things put together that you wouldn't think are separate. They can splice together things that you wouldn't believe are spliced together.
Did you do a fair amount of that for this film, or was it pretty continuous?
Of splicing and so
splicing,
forth? When it came to synchronizing the film, yes. We had some problems. Yeah, We had a few problems because, for example, there were some passages that didn't line up quite right. You notice the scene when D'Artagnan breaks in to go get Rochefort. He smashes the door, and he jumps at him, and he hits him, and he does all that. Well, that didn't line up so well. But the recording guy that I worked with was a semi-genius. He knew all these little techniques, these digital techniques whereby you could actually slow the music down without changing the pitch. Yeah, there's all kinds of very sophisticated recording things that you can do now. So we played with that until we got it just right. And there were some things that were kind of nasty to get right, but we were pretty lucky. And the good news was that we did several takes of every scene. What you're hearing tonight is what we finally put together. But we did we spent a whole day recording this. We started at 10 o'clock in the morning or something like that. We worked till 5 or 6 o'clock at night, and the kids took a break for lunch. But that was it. We recorded, and so we would do a segment, and then we'd record it again. So luckily, we had enough takes usually, so that we could pick and choose. And they can also, you might not believe this, but we'd have 2 takes, and they say, oh, the beginning was great, and the end of the other one was great. Actually splice them together. There's a lot of splices that you never, ever know where they are. You know, even I forget where some of them are now. So that's really amazing. We got stuck a couple times where we said, "Where's the other take of that? You know, we need to." There's no other take. So we were stuck. You know, you'll hear some, and well, you might not have noticed, but there's some intonation problems here and there with the instruments, things that are, you know, little details that that's the way it is. But I kind of like that in a way, because it does give you kind of a feeling of, it gives you the immediacy of the music that way too, so that's nice.
Are you tempted to write another?
Not now.
For 7 years.
Every 7 years, yeah, the 7-year itch. So it's a tremendous amount of work. I mean, when I say it took me 3 months, I mean working 5 days a week, 8 hours a day for 3 months. It was working every single day and not thinking of it as a job. Really, it was like a job, and you kind of fall into that. You fall into like a work habit, and you might think, oh, you know, you're doing great creative stuff. How can it be a job? But it kind of is, though. After a while, it's like, you know, you guys have to, you know, do your stuff every day. It's the same thing. Yeah.
Mike, the shape of this is so shaped by the movie as opposed to by your ideas as a composer.
Absolutely.
Did you have thematic ideas that you're now going to do something else with because you couldn't in there because it stopped being funny and it got sad and you would rather, I mean, sort of build more in the abstract a piece that has its own shape, just as music?
You could do that, but, you know, lesson number one, I'm an avid opera fan, and, you know, lesson number one from watching operas and, you know, admiring my great musical heroes of my life, the great opera composers were always completely responsive to the drama of the play that they set to music. When you hear a great opera, like if you hear Othello by Verdi, or something like that, and you hear that, you know, number one, he had a great libretto to work with. He had just this terrific libretto, incredibly well written, you know, based on Shakespeare, not bad, you know. And then what he did with that drama and how he made that work. So the music, in my opinion, the music must follow the drama. It has to. It really. If the music is successful, it's going to not only be a reflection of the drama, but you might get lucky as a composer. You might actually get lucky, and it might add a new dimension to it, so that there might be something in the music that would suggest something that's going to happen later in the film, or give you a feeling for what's about to happen, or something like that. And so if you can get to that level where you really feel like you're adding this dimension that wasn't there before, that's great, you know. And I think there's a couple in here maybe that I got, you know, I feel kind of good about. That's when you see a good film score, hear a good film score, or you see a good drama, a good opera, or something like that. That's what the composers get, you know, and it's great. It's great because it's this whole new dimension, you know. It's really incredible. So.
Well, this film was sort of an opera. It's rather operatic.
It is, yeah. They did a great job with the screenplay, don't you think? I mean, they took the Three Musketeers and the Man in the Iron Mask,
Yeah.
and put them together, and you wouldn't think that you know, Hollywood would, you know, they'd be able to do that kind of thing and make it effective. You just think, come on, Alexander Dumas, they're going to mess it up. You know, they're just going to screw this up, you know. And it's a terrific screenplay, you know. And the characters are great. I mean, I mean, when you first see the Cardinal, it's like, you're badass, you know. You know, and there's a lot of I remember watching so many silent films and saying these characters are so flat, and they never come out of the screen to you at all, you know. In this movie, it got me, because, and a lot of it was the characterizations and things, and there's some good actors in this too. They do some great things, and some of it's overdone, and you know, some of you were laughing at places where, you know, technically you're not supposed to be laughing. but you know, the characters, but you know, it's interesting to watch the good actors and the not so good actors at this time, because the ones that are really great, they just know how to physically do things and really get across what they need to get across. Whereas other ones just overdo, the ones that are not so good tend to overdo it, and they're the ones you laugh at, you know. But there's a great moment, one of my favorite moments in this whole thing, you probably didn't catch it, but I just love it. It's when D'Artagnan first comes out to see Constance, and she goes to grab her, and she won't, no, get away from me, because he grabbed onto the little maid, you know, and she goes, get away from me. And she does this little thing, she just goes like this with her shoulders. Did you catch that? Just this little thing, it's like, oh my God. It's like, boing, you know, and it's just this little physical thing. It's like, how did she know to do that? It's like, but it's the perfect communication, you know? It was perfect. So things like that in that movie really got me. I just thought were brilliant. And Douglas Fairbanks Sr., do you see those stunts he did? Yeah. That was him doing those stunts when he jumps up over the rail. That scene when they're killing.
Into the convent.
Yeah, the one
Yeah.
to the
The
window.
leap from the tree to the convent.
Yeah.
That's pretty famous.
Yeah. Could we do that again? Take 3. Jeez. You know, as near as I can tell, he did his own stunts. It looks like, I think he did all of his own stunts. As near as I can figure.
It was not a young man, right?
No. So, but, you know, those were the days.
How much rehearsal time did the kids have to put into getting
We started the beginning of September, and the concert, we premiered it middle to end of October. Wow. And they rehearsed, they had 1.5 hour rehearsals 3 days a week. They worked very hard. They worked very hard. They put a lot of work into it. Yeah, they did great.
Mike, how involved were you in that? At that point, your friend was conducting, right?
Right, Andy was conducting, and he said, stay away for a while.
So you had 2 performances, 2 live performances with the
We had one live performance,
Wow.
yeah, and then
So-
we did the recording, yeah.
Okay, so what did that feel like for you? You just sat there and watched everything,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, the live performance?
Yeah, what was it like?
It's always a little nerve-wracking, and this piece, of course, because it's live, and it's with the film, I'm watching the whole time saying, is he gonna get this cue, is he gonna get this, is he gonna get that coordinate? And Andy did a fabulous job. He did the first half an hour of the film without missing one cue. He did, it was spot on the first half hour. And then the remainder of the film, there were a few little things here and there, but he was unbelievable. I don't know how, I don't honestly know how somebody conducts a full wind ensemble for 86 minutes while watching a film. You know, I mean, it truly is a Herculean task, you know. But he's just got that. Andy's he's a fabulous musician. He's just unbelievable. I have total respect for him.
And when they do rehearsal, is he watching the movie every time?
No.
Or that's
No.
just the first?
No, they did a lot of rehearsals without the film, and then I would be there sometime, and he would just ask me about tempos to say, is that the right tempo for when we do the film? And of course, I had the tempos pretty much memorized.
So that was, when they played it, that was the first time he was watching the film as
No,
well?
they started probably, I would say a couple weeks before, he actually started watching the film. Yeah, he actually started watching it while they were doing it. So we were starting and stopping and doing that kind of stuff. Yeah. So, but the kids didn't get to see the film. They didn't get to see it at all. They would see little snippets of. We showed them the film, the silent film, at the very beginning, just so they could see it. But during the whole process when we were playing it, and of course you can imagine, you know, some of that music, you'd probably say, what's going on with this? What's this music? You know, I don't get any connection here. What's this? It jumps from here, it goes to there, it does this. It's not logical if you just listen to the music. So that's a challenge for the musicians, you know, when they're just reading the music, and you know, and so they didn't get to see it till quite a bit later, you know.
Did they each get a free DVD?
They sure did. There's only one guy that didn't. I couldn't reach him because he dropped out of school, and we were going to Manchester last week, and we stopped at the toll booth. And there he was collecting money at the toll booth. And I didn't have a DVD. I should have. Here's your DVD. You know? So I got to go drive back down to the Hooksett toll booth and find it. Here's your DVD. So there's one guy that didn't get one, but we were able to contact everybody else. Of course, the funny thing was that the actual production of the DVD was a year later when we finally finished it all. And a lot of the kids had graduated, so we had to go hunt them down. But we found them all, so it was great. Yeah. So I think they were pleasantly surprised at what they had done. It was really, you think about what they, you know, all the music that they played. It was a tremendous achievement for them. So it'll look pretty nice on their resumes, I hope. You know. So,
Can we buy a DVD?
yeah, you can. Sure. Just so happen to have some. So for $12.
Was this
you can buy a DVD.
figured out beforehand? I think you're doing the plug.
Yeah, she gets 20%.
She gets a discount off there.
Actually, none of the money goes to me for the sale of these DVDs because we could never find the copyright holder of this film. It was the old VHS version, and I was in contact with the lawyers. That's why it took so long to produce this thing. I was in contact with the lawyers at the university, and they finally said to me, all right, we tried. We weren't able to locate anybody, so let's go ahead with this. But what you need to do is set up a fund, an account, whereby any money that you make on the sales of DVDs of this thing, all the money goes into this account, so that if someday somebody comes forward and says, that's mine, that's my film, we'll at least show good, good faith, and that we've been, we tried to find you, couldn't find you, but here's your money. And hopefully they won't take us to court. So that's how that works. That was a pain in the butt. We spent almost a year trying to find the holder, the copyright holder of this version of the film. So.
Well, wouldn't it be in the public domain by now?
It would have been if I had used the original film, which would have been the smart thing to do. I would have, found somebody to get a copy of the original film and digitize it for me. But I had a VHS version of the film, and that was version that had been redone, and there's actually a terrific piano score with that VHS film. So that was made in 1971 or something like that, and that is a what do they call that in the copyright world? There's a name for that. But anyway, they were able to get another copyright because they added their own score to it, and they did a little bit of editing. You'll notice there was some tinting in there. There was some attempts at some color in there also. And,
I was gonna ask if that was.
yeah, they actually were goofing around. That was also a time. Thanks, Joe. Thanks for coming. That was also a time when they were just were they just starting to experiment with color?
No, that was ongoing from.
It was. Even before?
Yeah, even in the teens.
Oh, okay.
They would do sequences to give it just a different flavor
Different,
from the black and white.
Yeah. So they did some of that too when they redid it, when they remastered it. So they're able to get what's called a derivative work. That's the term that they use in the copyright world. It's called a derivative work, and that's copyrightable. So technically, there's still a copyright out, a legal copyright out on this thing, but it's a VHS tape. So somebody
But
holds.
there wasn't information on the tape? So why didn't you have
Oh,
that?
there was all kinds of information.
But not that.
But it led to dead ends, yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
I actually found a company, and it was the exact same name, exact same company in New York, and I called them up, and they said, we've only been in business for 3 months. I think you got the wrong number. So the people that had the name dropped it apparently, and somebody else picked it up, bought the name. And they had nothing to do with, it was a pain in the butt, I'm telling you. Awful, trying to locate, we were really trying hard to find things. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
So, but anyway, we're sort of done that, so I hope, we'll see if somebody comes forward. So I think people want to go home. So, but
That's why I asked.
So what's next in Providence?
That you
How do you buy the
decided this evening, which will remind me is the 122nd anniversary of Charlie Chaplin's birthday today.
that's great. I did not know that.
So what's next? D.W. Griffith's Intolerance?
A minute and a half at a time.
We will see. Stay tuned.